Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's like working, but every time. Doesn't make so much happy.
Mayor,
Yeah.
so for the presentation for the EMS rates,
Uh-huh.
I'll go ahead, I'll start it off with kind of the background and then I'll introduce the consultants that are on. So
Okay.
you can just kind of turn to me on that and
Okay.
I'll take it from there. So
Okay.
that's my plan at least.
Okay.
They were.
Thank you. Here you go, Mayor.
Oh, thank you.
They turned out really good. I wasn't sure because I just did it on my phone and I sent them to Staples. Yeah, you did a
You're
good
cool.
job.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm not either.
Yeah, well, I even like the idea of maybe putting, a few little arborvitae or something around it to make it a little green or, not just a blank fence or, with project pictures, that'd be good too. All that kind of, and I love the idea about, Aberdeen's under construction or growing or whatever,
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's
Send a
great.
good message,
Yeah.
hopefully. Yeah, thanks.
Love that. That's a great idea.
It's all visual.
Visual creature. Right there.
Nathan, if you could give it.
It's just, it's like intermittent. I was never. It's just intermittent. But that would be.
The guy delivering the
Presentation.
presentation.
It's gonna take a little bit.
You want to go out? We'll go outside? Do you want to go outside? I just let her outside because, of course, she was bugging me. I just let her outside. Okay.
What do you drink?
Yeah. Cracker.
Yeah. All right, everybody, welcome to the City of Aberdeen City Council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's Wednesday, March 13th and 6:30. If you haven't noticed, we got a new clock. Can we get a roll call, please?
Here. Aiken,
Here.
Hopkins. Deb, can you hear us? She's remote. Lawrence,
Here.
Mackey,
Here.
Morrison. Here. Newbill. Here. Bertini.
Here.
Fredo,
Here.
Theodore,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Orr.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to offer my condolences, I guess. This young lady just turned 16. But so I'd like to ask Violet if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
No, you're gonna say happy birthday.
It's like this, by the way. Okay, you know, we're not gonna sing happy birthday, sorry.
That's made up job.
I don't think very well. Okay, Council President Morrison.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, for the purpose of discussion, I would like to move to approve tonight's agenda.
We have a first and a second. Is there any discussion?
Okay, I would like to make an amendment to the agenda tonight to include a presentation by the Grace Harbor Conservation District.
Seconded.
First and second, any discussion on that? All approved?
I have one more amendment, and for this amendment, I would like to pass it on to Councilmember Perugini.
I motion that we amend tonight's agenda to remove the request from finance, recommending that the city council reconsider the LTAP grant applications from the harbor market.
Second.
It's been first and second. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mr. Cedar.
In one of the recent council meetings, I heard many, if not most, all the council indicate that they were in favor of the Harbor Art Guild projects, and that if there was a workaround that could be found for the potential or actual conflict of interest issue under our city charter, that we could move this forward. I have worked to strive towards a workaround. I don't know if it would be considered perfect, but we've made some efforts towards that. And I would like the council to leave this on the agenda and have a discussion and consider this request.
Thank you. That was the motion?
No, it's a-
just.
Oh, sorry.
And I would just like to remind council that our charter absolutely forbids us to give any officer on the council, any officer, me, if, yes, it does. Would you like a copy? I have copies. Officers shall not be interested in contract. No officer of the city shall be directly or indirectly interested in any contract with the city for any institution, board, officer, agent, or employee thereof for the use of the city, or become surety, which the Art Guild is the surety, for the performance of any such contract. The violation of any of the provisions of this section shall work a forfeiture of the office of the officer violating the same, and shall warrant his removal from the office by impeachment or other procedure. And then the state RCW confirms this. They say the local charter controls the chapter. So the RCW cannot override our local chapter. The RCW actually states it. If any provision of this chapter conflicts with the provision of a city or county charter, or with any provision of a city county charter, the charter shall control. And the charter is very clear. It's very black and white. And it's not that I'm against this at all. I am funding out of my own pocket to raise money for the rainbow because I believe in it. I think it's a great project. But if we approve this for one officer, then we have to approve it for another. And actually I've heard, well, they did it for so-and-so. So I can break the law for this person, but I can't break it for this person. I just don't feel good about it and I will vote no. And that's why I presented this. And Doug knows I care about him and I care about the rainbow, but I also care about our laws and I have to obey our law.
Councilperson Ellis.
Thank you, Mayor. And, I agree that laws are there to be followed. There's also procedures that are in place for how to do that. And the state has come up with a procedure that when there is a conflict of interest, it spells out how that is to be acknowledged and for that person to basically remove themselves from any decision making. We, as a council, we've done this before when there are conflicts of interest that pertain to council members. And I see this as another opportunity for, in this case, Mayor Orr to recuse himself when this comes up, if it moves forward for our vote. And I'd like to see us address this in an open way and then move on.
Is there any other discussion? Comparable phone. Okay, so the roll call vote is to remove the item from tonight's agenda. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Carter?
I vote to remove it.
Yes. Ellis?
No.
Gagan?
Yes.
Hodgkin?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Mackey?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Newbill?
Yes.
Perchini?
Yes.
Fredo?
No.
Sedor?
No.
Taylor?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-3, Mr. Mayor. The item is removed.
Thank you very much. Now we go back to the other.
Now we need a motion to approve.
I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I second it.
First and seconded, is there any more discussion? All in favor?
I
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Excuse me. Okay, next, let's go to public comments and please keep it to 3 minutes. And also please state your name and your name, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. So the microphone's over there. Just have a seat in that front row there. Okay.
Steve Haywood from Ward 4. This was already dead once. I'm sure the city has a lot of other things to do they could work really hard on. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we bringing something that's already been voted no on?
It's gone.
Just no,
Oh, looks really yummy.
Robert's rules, nobody up there says anything while somebody's standing here. Thank you. Have a good evening.
My name's Shirley Gwen. I live at 2407 Cherry Street in Aberdeen, Washington. I've lived there for 21 years.
Yeah, I live on West Fifth Street, just one block up from Cherry.
We, all of us live on the street and I walk and we walk every day, and we've had some instances through the years that haven't been pleasant. And I won't go into it a lot, but I have asked for other devices to be put up to try to get the drivers to slow down, the trucks, everything. We have a tremendous, a lot of people, especially in the summer, that come down and walk on our street. And Oak Street is a speedway. And when you think about the PUD is there with 110 and plus employees, plus the hospital hill, plus the daycare center down, it's a busy, busy street. We would like to have some help. And Josh, the new traffic coordinator, policeman, came by. I was astounded. He was so nice. And I want to thank all of you, everybody I called, because I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing. I've done it before, but you guys are all new. I can't tell you how nice everyone was. And I love nice. So we would like to have some help. We would like to have a device. And I had one time asked to have by my house, I have the stop sign taken down. It was so just not used at all, but people are getting a little better, but in the summer it's worse because the kids are out of school, young people drive trucks, people walk up and down the street with their babies, there's dogs, there's cars. She walks up and down the street, she wants to say her talk. So we just would love to have some help and discuss this with somebody and help us.
So I'm Lucian O'Brien. I live at 2420 Cherry. And I have sight issues. Like not much. And so I walk my dogs. There are so many kids on skateboards, on everything, up and down that street, and the cars just go racing down there. And I've gotten almost hit a couple of times. And it's just a dangerous street. So having a device that could help control that would really make all the difference in the world. And because there are people walking, running, jogging, there's no sidewalks. And so it makes it even more dangerous than what it is in place else without the sidewalk. So thank you for saying that.
One thing I want to accentuate about it is there's a school there at Scammell and Cherry Street. And so when school lets out, lots of kids, the block that the school is on, there are sidewalks, but past that, no sidewalks. So there's a lot of school age kids walking along there. And there's a lot of people that don't pay attention to the speed they're supposed to be going, even though they're in the school district. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michelle Nipper. I live in Ward 5 as of September. And since we have moved into this area, I live on North E Street. Everybody knows that's where the methadone clinic is, housing authority. We have a guy who has been parked outside since Christmas. I have called code enforcement. He is building houses on the back of his truck, hasn't moved. They now have taken over the sidewalk. And since that truck has showed up, we've had a guy who frequents that truck quite often. I call the police, call 911. I've been threatened in the last 3 weeks over half a dozen times. I get told on Friday by law enforcement that the people didn't want to press charges, whatever, because they say he didn't do anything to them. But yet I'm being threatened. I don't want to leave my house. I have to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning every morning for work, and I don't want to leave. I have to have my husband walk me because I'm too afraid to walk. It's kind of gotten to the point where anybody who lives on North E Street, especially in the apartments I live in, don't feel safe even leaving.
Can you advise what 100 block that is?
200.
Thank you.
Right first to be there.
No, I said I was gonna go last week.
Let's Bolton Board 4. I sent you all an email about the sound system. Bravo, I'm hearing you much better. So really appreciate that. I don't know if somebody tuned up, whatever happened. We're hearing you better out here. So hotel motel tax. What a disappointment. You know, the issue isn't interest, it's financial interest. And the mayor doesn't have a financial interest in Rainbow. The auditor gave you a way to deal with that. And you're refusing to take the auditor's recommendation over your personal opinion. And I find that offensive. You know, you're council members, and we're paying for a city attorney and a city legal department to give you good advice. And you're not taking it. You're taking advice from, I don't know, I don't feel that it's right. Your interpretation of the law. You know, two good events that bring people into downtown that increase our tax base, support local businesses, and you're hobbling this. And I wonder, why is that happening? Why do we have such a problem with this? And really, don't give me that the mayor's got a financial interest, because he doesn't have a financial interest. So anyway, but keep up the good work, but figure something out for this. I mean, you've got advertising money. Hotel motel tax will only be used for advertising. You've got advertising money that you're not using. And the reason you're not using it is not a valid argument. Sorry. Anyway, thanks.
I am Maya Hernandez from Ward 5, and I actually have some handouts. If you guys would like to follow along with me, just. Yeah, here, please don't open them until everybody has one. You. And 5 there, 1, 2. All right. Mr. Mayor, thank you, if you wouldn't mind. All right. So this Friday marks 3 months, exactly 13 weeks since the city of Aberdeen killed my son. On Friday, December 15th, we called 911 due to labor complications. EMTs took their time and were extremely unprofessional. When I asked for an internal investigation, what I got was a phone call telling me that 16 minutes to get me out of the house was actually good timing, followed by lies about why it took that long. Yet it was for some reason logged that it took 10 minutes to drive 2 miles to the hospital at 6 a.m. Then I was taken to the hospital that was not prepared for an emergency like mine whatsoever. 2.5 hours is how long it took to perform an emergency C-section because they had no one on hand or equipment ready to go. My son was within 30 to 60 minutes of being savable. The hospital is a glorified methadone clinic, and it legally needs to be a level 3 hospital to serve the population that it claims to serve. Too many overdoses have become prioritized at this hospital. The city administrator is supposed to be making sure that everyone stays on task with the homeless issue, right? It is those people who are flooding the hospital and causing there to be not enough resources. Ruth is now politicizing our grief. She has taken it upon herself to spread information and lies against my family. These media outlets that she keeps talking about having in her back pocket are refusing to get any story straight, especially when it revolves around my family. I have offered to set many stories straight, and they tell me they won't because of Ruth. everyone who has had a hand in the death of my son and the harassment of my family, they will go completely no longer unseen because this is all coming out. I have waited 3 months to have what little strength I have to come up here and talk about this. I've done all the investigating that I can, and I am watching this city kill its citizens in the names of making other people's careers. And I am not having it anymore. I'm just not. And when
That's
I
your
hand it
time.
out to all of
Thank
you.
you.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, I'll come back later.
Thank you.
Delbert Sidell, Ward 2. Just I'd like to ask, this Rainbow Festival, is this the best thing that we can do for our town? Because there's a majority of people here that don't agree with this, they're working people, they're Christians, they just don't agree with this type of atmosphere and this type of, people coming to our town. For one, there's, transvestites that can induce little children, and that's just not right, We need to do something better for our town than a rainbow festival that brings just the minute people into this town. How about something that everyone can do? I was trying to find some different, agendas, different, environmental events that we could, we could be proud of this town. Everybody I talk to from in this town, from out of this town, go clear away. The people they drive around this town. They just don't want to see it anymore. They don't see the homeless people up there down underneath the bridge. They just don't want to see it. I mean, we ought to be ashamed, all of you. I mean, anybody that wants to, be proud of this town, I'd love to be proud of this town. I pay taxes, and I don't really want my taxes to go to something like the Rainbow Festival. I mean, just get people like this lady. I mean, it seems like the city just don't care about the taxpayers. There's another business that went out of town, the Nevada coffee shop just went down. She's citing homelessness as the problem. Is when are we gonna get a handle on those things? You guys want to put the homeless center out in Junction City where people aren't gonna even go. It's a safety hazard. For one, there's no sidewalks out to this location where you want to put this deal. You got, Sierra log trucks going in and out. You got the ready mix log truck, cement trucks going in and out. There's no safety for them. Where they're gonna walk back and forth. They're gonna come to town. It just seems like you guys have your whole agenda mixed up. I mean, the world's crazy as it is. We don't have to contribute to any of this. I mean, let's just get real with what we're doing here. I mean, it's pretty simple. It really is. I mean, you guys are making such complication and inviting all these different people into our town that, you get all these people going. We got a large amount of people that go in and out of this town, going to Ocean Shores, land dating and stuff like that. And there's a lot of things they could do, but they drive through Wainuchi to get here, to get out there a lot of times. Because they don't want to come to Aberdeen, and it's pathetic, it really is. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is Joe Powell. I live in Ward 2. We're trying to think of, I had some stuff happen at the house, kind of, where dispatch don't come, and it was really heart pounding kind of stuff where somebody's pulling for their gun and I have a gun drawn on them. I'm saying F around and find out, and they're saying I'm effing around and I'm finding out, and the dispatch is saying, well, they have a right to be in the street. And we don't even get a call back from the officer, but I didn't mean to talk about that. I just wanted to validate the other people who were talking that this was like a huge issue. And I think it depends on where you live. You're either like considered a part of, oh, well, that's just not a good area, sort of. Anyways, okay, at Powell Market Garden, we say we can make the world a better place if we try. So I'm trying to, okay, so a lot of the problems, almost everything I see people talking about it has to do with the commodification of human suffering, which is a really big deal in this town. Like if you want a job and you're my age or anybody who is my age, you're gonna have to be involved in something where somebody is a client receiving a service, because the society is so messed up that nobody wants to participate. And that has manifested itself in a homeless industrial complex. And it's an international issue. For instance, the banking system that Walmart uses is Bodega Aurora. Bodega Aurora is like a small store that they have in indigenous communities in Central America, also owned by Walmart, that sells like the Ozark Trail brand camping equipment to people who live in subsistence areas. It's a part of a larger thing. It's called the homeless industrial complex. At least that's the best thing we can think of it to call it at Powell Market Garden. Anyways, really good things are happening in town. The kitchen is about to be opened at Grace Harbor College. It's an $8 million kitchen. It's really good. We should be up and running in time for the Little League Festival. And we gained a lot of traction as a business just from having a booth at Rain Glow here at Powell Market Garden. It was a really big deal for us. And I just want to say that, you know, regardless of the, you know, how it gets done and whether there actually is a workaround. I mean, when I was at Rain Glow, I lost power and, you know, we figured out a way to patch it and make it work. And even when it went out again, I broke open some glow sticks and started flinging it around everywhere. We were selling like cosmic cupcakes, and it was a really cool thing. And we found a way to make it kind of like even better than it would have been. And so I don't think that there's any reason to even scrap a workaround if that does exist. It's kind of like disrespectful to just ignore it. But, you know, there are bigger things like addressing the homeless industrial complex that has manifested itself and ruined so many lives and continues to perpetuate that. Anyways, I guess that's all I got. So thank you for listening.
All right, anybody else? Well, thank you for your comments. Now, Council President Morrison for the consent agenda.
It's consent agenda, which include minutes from the February 28th meeting, accounts payable, payroll, and the February homelessness expense report.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Is there any comment? Seeing none. Call in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Passing. And now we have a presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Golding.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So tonight we have part one of what I'm calling a two-part project that the fire department is working on, and that is our EMS rates, both the EMS utility rate, which tonight we'll be focusing on with the cost of service study results. And then the second part, which we are working on, which will be coming forward here in the next few weeks, is just looking at our rates that we bill out for our EMS billing. For when we do transport patients and such. It's been a while since it's been looked at as well. So that's going to be coming forward shortly after this as well, just as a heads up. A little background here is we identified a need for a cost of service study for our EMS utility. Last one was done back in 2010. So it's been quite a while. They're usually more like a 5-year plan for getting those done. But when it was identified, we were in the middle of the RFA process. So we deferred doing a study because, well, we could do a study. If the RFA passed, we'd have to do another study. So why duplicate the effort? So we deferred it to, really was going to be in 24, but when the RFA failed, we kind of moved that time frame up and started towards the end of, into the summer last year and got to the point where we were ready for a presentation. So we have listed the services of FCS. Martin is online here. I'll let him introduce himself and his team there. And he will be giving the presentation to their findings of the EMS utility rate study. So Martin, take it away.
Okay. Hey, good evening. Chief, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thank you. For the record, Martin Shaw, Senior Project Manager with FCS Group. Tonight with me is Shivani Lau, Assistant Project Manager, as well as Chase Bozette, Assistant Project Manager with FCS Group as well. We formed the technical team that conducted the study for you, council. And as the chief mentioned, we're here to share the results of this and to answer any questions that you might have. Before I begin, I would like to express our appreciation to Chief Golding, Jessica, and Megan for all of their help during the study and getting us to this point. This presentation is for you, council, so please do stop us and ask any questions along the way. We'll be more than happy to take your questions as we go. So for those of you who have not worked with FCS Group, we're a financial consultancy based in Redmond, Washington. We've been in business since 1988. We have about 35 employees, and we've consulted for nearly every municipality in Washington state. We do work in Oregon, as far south as California, and then as far east as Colorado. Our firm specializes in financial analysis for municipalities, utility rate studies, fee studies, and then financial analysis such as this one for your ambulance utility rate, or ambulance utility program. In terms of our scope of work, as the chief mentioned, the previous study was completed back in 2010. FCS Group prepared that study as well. We have two parts to this presentation. Part one is to update that previous study, as I mentioned back in 2010. Key assumptions there is we're assuming current levels of service. So in other words, for the listening public, what that means is we're maintaining the current services that are being provided to the community. As part of this analysis, we're also assuming no new stations or FTEs. The second part of this analysis, and we'll go over this as part of this presentation as well, is to review and update rates that the city assesses to contracted agencies. As you know, your ambulance utility does provide transportation for surrounding communities, and on a cost reimbursement basis, those communities reimburse the city for your services. And as part of part two, we have reviewed and recommend updating rates for these contracted communities. So let's go over part one, which is updating your rates for the ambulance utility program. So just a little bit of background, council. RCW 3521-766 authorizes cities to form an ambulance utility. In terms of ambulance utilities around the state, it's more common with smaller communities. We don't see it as much in terms of larger communities such as Spokane or Yakima, but it is a form of funding of emergency medical services for smaller communities such as yourself. FCS did complete a ambulance utility rate study for the cities of Hoquiam and Ocean Shores within the last about 12 to 15 months. In terms of how the utility rate is developed for an ambulance utility program, it consists of two items. One is called the availability portion of the rate, and the second is called the demand portion of the rate. And the best way to describe that is when we think about fire services and how fire services are provided, council, time that's spent by staff when they're at the station waiting for a call, that's considered availability. But when they do receive a call and they hop into the service rig and they roll out to call for service, that time that they spend responding to a call is referred to as demand costs for services. And that demand call for service doesn't end until staff returns back to the station. Any questions on that as a background, council? In terms of, again, a more context setting, the previous study, the profile for the city included 2 stations, about 30, as you can see, about 37 staff, 2 FTEs per 1,000 population, a city population of just under 17,000. And then towards the end here, calls for service, about 3,400 calls for service, or about 206 calls for service per 1,000 population. Your cost of operations at that time was about $1.7 million. Now, fast forward 14 years to 2024, we still operate with 2 stations. In terms of staff, we have 44 staff today, or about 2.3 staff per 1,000 population. We have about almost 5,600 calls for service, or about 326 calls for service per 1,000 population. The net cost for service is about 5.3 million to about 3.2 million, and I'll go over those numbers in a second as to why we're seeing a range there. In terms of the calculated monthly rate, the rate that we calculated back in 2010 was $20.50, and the calculated rate that we have for this study ranges between $32 and $57 or $59, excuse me, per month. And again, I'll go over the reason for that range as well. And when we think about the fire services being provided to the community, we have, of course, Chief Golding, who serves as your lead for this department, and he's supported by an assistant fire chief and 3 battalions or 3 shifts. What we're doing as part of the study is we're taking a look at the cost of this entire operation and taking that cost, council, and breaking it down between availability and demand costs. That's the purest interpretation of the RCW. Now, we also recognize that your city finances the fire department to the tune of about $3.7 million a year. That comes from your general fund, and then the balance of your program supports your emergency medical services program, which is your ambulance utility program. So this study takes a look at the total cost of operations, and what we're doing is we're calibrating the rate for the ambulance utility side of the house. And there are 3 policy decisions that we'd like to review with you, council, in terms of where we set rates and how we fund your ambulance utility services. So again, as I mentioned, your fire and your emergency services is funded from 2 sources. Your general fund, as well as your emergency services fund, excuse me. The general fund funds fire suppression, as well as your call center, and your emergency services fund funds your ambulance utility program. Working with Chief Golding, as well as city leadership, we evaluated 3 scenarios for you. The first scenario, number 1, under the second large bullet here, is to maintain the current general fund and emergency services fund funding split. Scenario number 3 represents the full funding of your emergency services and fire services based on calls for service between fire calls for service and emergency medical services. So in other words, scenario number 3 eliminates that distinction between general fund and the emergency services fund, and treats the program as one operation. So scenarios numbers 1 and 3 really kind of form the bookends of the analysis for you, council. And scenario number 2 is, for lack of a better term, is your Goldilocks scenario. And what we're trying to achieve here is a balanced funding split between your general fund and your emergency services fund, and to try to strike a balance in terms of the adjustment to rates and what those rates will look like to the community. We were also asked to, in terms of the third bullet here, Council, is to evaluate the impact to your utility rates by utilizing the program's current fund balance. So in all three scenarios, what we're looking at is a intentional burn down or use of your fund balance down to about 80 days of operations, or about 20% of reserves by the end of the study period. The 20% reserve target, Council, is fairly reasonable. That's comparable to the reserve level for your city's general fund. And the way to think about a reserve, Council, is if everything were to come to a complete stop for city operations. So in other words, if your revenues into the city were to suddenly stop, how much reserves can we draw upon to continue city operations before all funds are exhausted? And that's what that reserve target represents. So in this case, it represents about 3 months worth of operations. Okay, so with that as background, let's dive into the financial details here. So between fire and emergency services, your total cost of operations is worth about $8.8 million. And how that is funded is about $3.7 million, as I mentioned earlier, is funded from your general fund, and the remaining $5.1 million is funded from your emergency services fund. Now, when we take your total cost of operations, the $8.8 million, and we attribute that based upon the calls for service, we see a slightly different picture. And what that picture looks like is about $7.3 million is spent on emergency services, and about $1.6 million is spent on fire suppression services. And this split is fairly typical from what we see with other communities. You know, when we think about calls for service, we do not see fires all the time within the community. So that's more the exception than the rule. Where we do see calls for service is for calls for emergency medical services. In terms of taking a look at your emergency services for your ambulance utility program only, again, we're going back here, and we're taking this portion of your program, and we're looking at it between availability and demand costs. Here, we're beginning to split the costs for emergency services between availability and demand based upon how staff uses their time. Again, when they're responding to a call versus when they're at the station waiting for a call. And this split is what RCW 3521-766 is looking for, is a split between these two silos for costs. So again, we were asked to evaluate 3 scenarios, and what we'd like to do now is to go over the financial analysis behind each of these 3 scenarios, and then show you what the rates look like under each scenario. So before we dive into the details, any questions so far, Council, in terms of the methodology or the concept that we're following here? So let's start off with high-level assumptions that guided our financial analysis. So we, again, prepared a financial analysis through the year 2028. We assumed long-term inflation at about 3% per year, labor cost inflation of 5% per year, and then decreasing to about 2% per year over the back half of the study. Benefit and cost inflation, we estimate that at 3%. Annual customer growth at less about 2.2%, and then incident growth at about 12.7%. In terms of your current ambulance utility rate, that's your current rate is about $28 per month. And again, as you recall from one of my earlier slides, the calculated rate back in 2010 was about $20, and the city has since then adjusted rates by inflation only up to today, and thus to $28 per month today. So when we've developed the rates for a ambulance utility program, another way of thinking about that is what we call revenue requirements. So in other words, how much revenue do we need to fully fund your program? And when we think about revenue requirements, we think about it in terms of what we call the net revenue requirement. And the net revenue requirement is simply taking the total gross cost of your operations, subtracting any revenues that are non-rate revenues, and then the remainder represents your revenue requirement. Now, revenues that you receive from non-rate sources includes insurance reimbursements for ambulance transports, contributions from neighboring jurisdictions that receive contracted services, interest earnings, for example. So those would be all sources of non-rate revenues. So when we study this, let's study this chart for a second. $7.2 million in terms of total cost for your ambulance utility program, 1.9 million in terms of sources of non-rate revenues, leaving net costs of about 5.4 million. And that represents the amount of monies that we need to recover to fund your ambulance utility program. And hereafter, the math is fairly simple. We take your net cost of providing services, again, the 5.4 million, and we look at the number of billing units within the community. And a billing unit is represents the number of utility bills that we send out over the course of a year, or 12 months. So when we divide the net revenue requirement against your number of annual billing units, we come up with an annual rate of $704. Divide that by 12, and you come up with a monthly rate of $59. So this is scenario one. This would be the full cost of services. So in other words, we're looking at the cost of your total program and determining what the required rate is to fully fund your ambulance program as it sits today. And again, these rates are set so that we also gradually draw down your fund balance down to about 80 days of operations by 2028. And just to put that in context, Council, that 80 days is equal to about $1.8 million. Scenarios numbers 2 and 3, the math is fairly similar, except the numbers that we're using are slightly different. So let's start off with scenario number 3. So we established for you one bookend, which is what is the upper bookend in terms of the cost for service. So let's take a look at the lower bookend in terms of cost for service. So what we're doing here is we're looking at maintaining your current general fund support for fire as well as emergency services. So as you recall from several slides earlier, your general fund currently contributes about $3.7 million for fire services. However, the number of calls for service is mostly within the emergency medical services realm versus the fire suppression realm. So scenario number 3 really looks at the policy decision of should we maintain that current contribution from the general fund for emergency services. So in this case, the cost that we're trying to recover for ambulance services is worth about $5.1 million. We subtract from that non-rate revenues, which again is worth about 1.9 million. Come with total net costs of about 3.3 million. Divide that by the same number of billing units, and we get an annual rate of 382 or a monthly rate of $32 per month. And under this scenario, we're burning down or we're using your fund balance down to about 80 days, or approximately $1.3 million. So that represents the opposite bookend of the choices before you, council. The Goldilocks scenario is where we're trying to strike a balance. And under the Goldilocks scenario, we're trying to strike almost a midpoint between where we landed in terms of the lower bookend and where we landed in terms of the upper bookend. So under this scenario, we're looking at the general fund. Instead of funding 3.6 million, their contribution to fire services would be a little bit less. So in other words, the monies that we're offsetting as part of the scenario would then be available for other general government services for the city. Total cost of service for your ambulance program here is just under 6.1 million. We subtract from that the non-rate revenues. We come up with net cost of about 4.2 million. Divide that into your annual billing units, and we come up with an annual rate of $543 per year. Divide that by 12, and we come up with a monthly rate of $45 per month. So the scenarios that we've come up for you so far is $32, $45, or $59. Okay, so those are the markers for the 3 scenarios that we looked at. As I mentioned, we also forecasted costs out through 2028, and here we show, based upon the forecasted expenses as well as the forecasted revenues over the same time period, what would the monthly rate look like over the next 5 years. So under scenario number 1, $59 would gradually increase to about $72 per month in 2028. That compares to your current monthly rate of about just under $28. Scenario number 3, which is your opposite bookend, this would be maintaining the current $3.7 million of general fund funding for services, would increase rates to $31.87 in 2024, and that rate would increase to about $41.20 by 2028. And in scenario number 2, the rate that we calculated in year 1 or 2024 is just over $45, and that rate would increase to about $54 by 2028. This is another way of looking at the 3 scenarios in terms of the level of general fund subsidy. Excuse me. In terms of the monthly rate in 2024, again, we're ranging from $32 to about $59. The general fund subsidy that we're looking at is between 1.6 million to about 3.7 million. The scenario number 2, which again is the scenario that we're trying to strike a balance between scenarios. We target using a general fund support of about 2.8 million. So again, I kind of right in between scenarios numbers 1 and 3. So in terms of the staff recommendation, based upon our discussion with city staff, what city staff is recommending is for council to adopt scenario number 2, which would establish rates at $45.30 starting in 2024, and then over time that would increase to $54 by 2028. In terms of establishing these rates, it's up to you, council, in terms of when you adopt your rates ordinance, whether you wish to set rates for 1 year or for multiple years. Some communities will establish the rate for all 5 years, and then you will financially monitor your program to ensure that those rates that you've adopted over the next 5 years will be sufficient to fund your program. Some communities will adopt rates in year 1 and then adjust rates accordingly as we go. FCS, we recommend that communities reevaluate your ambulance utility rates about once every 3 to 5 years, just to ensure that the cost of your operations is still aligned with changes in your community. Yes, did you have a question? Okay.
No, I'm trying to hear.
Okay, all right, no worries. Slide 19, this shows the gradual use of your fund balance. So currently, the fund balance in your ambulance utility program is about 3.3 million. And under the staff recommended scenario, we're gradually using that fund balance over time to about 80 days of operations by 2028. At FCS Group, we feel this is a fairly reasonable approach. You know, these monies are available. We are using reserves to fund ongoing expenses, and so that's a consideration. However, under this rate path, I think it's a very prudent plan, and it gradually utilizes your fund balance down to about 80 days of operations by 2028. Now we were asked during the study, well, what does 2029 look like? Well, what we would do starting 2029 is, let's assume everything goes as planned. You end 2028 with 1.3 million. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor, did you have a question?
Yeah, Liz Ellis, please.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you. Chart, you show for 2024, 195 days of O&M. So does that reflect that this would be adopted, say, sometime around July?
Yes, it will be end of your fiscal year. So in other words, it will be in for the city because you operate on a calendar year. It will be in December of 2024.
Reflects the ending fund balance. We covered that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, thank you. So starting 2029, what does that process look like? Let's assume that we end 2028 with 1.3 million. That would represent your beginning fund balance in 2029. And the rate study, let's say for the next 5 years, starting 2029, the objective of that rate study would be to ensure that your rates are calibrated properly to maintain your fund balance at about that $1.3 million level over the next 5 years. In terms of capital funding, per RCW, no capital funding costs are included in the rates forecasted. Now, your rates can be used to fund apparatus replacement. but the initial acquisition, for example, of a new piece of apparatus, that would be considered a capital cost. So that should be funded from general taxes, but then ongoing funding would come from rates. Again, your fund balance targets. Generally, we target between 60 to 90 days of operations. We're coming in at 80 days as part of this study, so right in the middle. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if all operations were to come to a stop, that those reserves then would be used as a backstop to support continued operations before all funds are exhausted. And as I mentioned as well, your general fund maintains a fairly similar fund balance target. When we took a look at your fund balance target over the past couple of years, your ending fund balance ranged from about 14 to 22%. So what we're doing with your ambulance utility would be right in line with how the city's managing your general fund at this time. In terms of where your ambulance utility rates sit, let me blow this up a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. Your current rate is $27.96. You're just below Sunnyside and Pasco, and you're just below City of Montesano and Kennewick. Hoquiam is here at $39, and under the scenario number 3, the subsidized or maintain the current general fund support for your program, that rate is $31.87. The recommended approach is scenario number 2, which is up here at $45.30. So you'll be just above Hoquiam, and then the full cost approach, scenario number 1 would be at $59. We do have markers here for certain cities that do receive funding through an EMS levy. And as you're aware, those levies come through property taxes, and they pay for advanced life support services. Cities of Hoquiam, College Place, Mercer Island, for example, Walla Walla, Grandview, College Place, each of these communities have an EMS levy. Right, so anyway, that concludes our first part of the presentation. What we'd like to do now is turn our attention to part 2 of the analysis, which is a discussion about the contracted district rates. Now, before I go here, I'd like to just pause just for a moment and see if council, if you have any questions. So again, going back to the scope of work, we were asked to review the contracted rates. These are rates that the city assesses to neighboring districts, as well as agencies, to provide ambulance transport services. And the guiding principles here is that those entities should pay for their full cost of service. So in other words, there shouldn't be any type of subsidy coming in. Excuse me, I'm turning my light here. Any type of subsidy coming in from your general taxpayers for these customers who reside outside of the city. In terms of current contracted jurisdictions, as you can see, there are several jurisdictions here that do contract for services with the city. The dates here represent the date in which these jurisdictions entered into a contract with the city of Aberdeen. In terms of jurisdictions that were served in 2024, we see that there were approximately 613 incidents that we responded to. It's about 11% of your total incidents overall for your program. City of Cosmopolis and the State Department of Corrections were, as well as Junction City or Fire District number 10, were the largest users or requesters of services, I guess. And then, as you can see, several other districts make up a much smaller share. In terms of determining the cost of service, we start off with looking at the share of calls for service for your program in total. So when we take a step back, we have about 5,600 EMS incidents overall. Again, this is in city as well as outside of city. And when we split that between in city and out of city, in city is about 90% of your calls, or about 4,900 calls, and about 613 calls, or about 11% of your calls are for these outside districts. In terms of determining the net revenue requirement, this is fairly straightforward. We take your total cost of services, net of contributed revenues, about $5.4 million, and we split that based upon the number of incidents. So districts represent 11% of your calls for service. Therefore, they should they should be responsible for 11% of the net revenue requirement. So we take that $600,000 and we divide that by your number of incidents, and that gives us a number, and that number represents the cost per incident. So in other words, if there is a call for service from Cosmopolis and a city unit has to be dispatched to Cosmopolis, pick up the patient, transport them to a local hospital, and then return to the station in the city, that cost for that service, the time involved, the cost of transport is equal to about $960 per incident. Our last slide of the presentation, in terms of conclusions and next steps for you to consider, council, we've presented for you 3 scenarios. We do have a staff recommended scenario, which is again scenario number 2. What we'd like to do now is open it up to any additional questions that you may have, either directed to us or to Chief Golding and his staff. And what we're seeking tonight is direction from council in terms of an update to your ambulance utility charge. And then in terms of the calculated rates for your districts, we've provided the groundwork for you to I guess reopen or to discuss the cost of service to your neighboring contracted jurisdictions as to the cost of delivering services to those communities. So that ends our presentation, council. Again, it's been a pleasure working with you, with your city, with Chief Golding and his team, and with your city manager, Ruth. So again, we'll open up to questions, and we'd be more than happy to entertain any questions that we have today. If you don't have any tonight, but you do come up with some later on, feel free to convey those to the chief, and he can convey those to us.
Chair meeting.
Any questions?
Chief Golding, you've already received some input and some questions about parameters and scope from me. Do you need anything additional in order to give them some additional guidance that we discussed?
No, so what he's referring to, Martin, is he had posed a question of if the council had discussion and wanted to go with a different price point, if you will, for the utility rate. If you guys are okay with what that looks like, forecasting that out.
Absolutely, absolutely, Chief. You know, we're in the business of financial analysis, so if flavors numbers 1, 2, and 3, Councilman, doesn't fit with your objectives, and you want us to run a different scenario, we'd be happy to do that.
So just, you can forward those concepts to me and I can get those all
Okay.
to,
And then I have one last question relative to contract for services rate. If the average was shown at about $960 per incident, do we have a level of flexibility to say, well, this is around that, say to 1,000? Is that within the realm of what we can consider?
we can try
I
to
would tell,
negotiate anything.
Okay.
So, yeah, we could, and I'm sorry, I walked over Martin here, but, yeah, when it comes to those outlying districts that we do cover, it is a contract negotiation. And, you know, that there's some give and take there, of course, but, you know, the idea is to try to do our best to get that 100% cost recovery out of the districts, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I'm sorry, Martin, did you have anything to add to that? I walked over you, I'm sorry.
oh, no worries, Chief. No, no additional comments, Chief. You know, these figures provide the cost basis for your rates. There's nothing in RCW that says that you're limited to this rate. You know, as Chief mentioned, it's a negotiated price point between you and your contract customer.
Okay, Councilman Ellis.
I just wanted to comment that when the RFA failed to pass, we knew we would be needing to revisit our rates. And what we're doing now just isn't sustainable by drawing down our general fund reserves. So we need to take some action. The recommended step number 2 it still represents a big addition of what our ratepayers are having to pay. But it also is it's stretching out that expense over some time in a way that is causing the least impact to people, while helping us to find other sources for these expenses. I know I benefited from getting this presentation in paper form. I don't know if my fellow council members were able to see this before tonight's meeting. It's a whole lot of material and I think it will be helpful for us to have a few days to go over it and to discuss it more thoroughly.
Okay. I had a question. So every time that ambulance goes out, an EMS call, I see a fire truck with it. Is that included in this cost?
Yes, so if it's an EMS call that requires additional manpower, then the fire engine goes with. That is considered, even though it's a fire truck, it's considered an EMS response. So those are factored into the rate, yes.
Okay, thanks. Councilman
And
Sider.
Chief, you have another scope, a second component to this, the general rates for service.
Right, it's a different beast than this, but it's actually our billing rates.
Are you anticipating, or what would your preference be? Are you looking to the council to to approve a proposal or a recommendation at the next council meeting? Or are we talking about maybe a month or month and a half or 2 months down the road, or?
So as far as the EMS utility rate, it's your schedule as far as when the council wants to make that decision. And then that decision, our goal as staff is not to it be effective like then. We are planning for a July 1 increase. So it gives some time for us to get information out and prepare the public for whatever increase might be. When we come back and we start to discuss the actual ambulance rates themselves, it'll be before July, it'll be within the next couple meetings. And then once we get all of it kind of buttoned up together, we can put that all into one resolution. And that's how we've generally done our EMS rates, both utility and billing is in one complete resolution to bring forward.
And part of our process, we have to approve either a resolution or an ordinance to be a resolution in this case.
Yes, resolution.
But we'd also be holding a public hearing on it for public input on it also. As part of the process or
not a resolution.
Yeah, so this isn't a utility tax like our water rates are or our sewer rates. We're certainly happy if the council would like to hold a public hearing to hear what the public would like to say. That's definitely an option. We could build that into the schedule.
I think that would be critical.
I have a question about grants we've received in the past and about particularly the transit authority grant and why we're not seeking that any longer.
So the transit grant in and of itself is no longer.
That whole program is.
That whole program is done.
Wasn't it one of a kind and stuff? Weren't we the only EMS?
We were the only county in the state that the transit collected money that got funneled to EMS.
Yes.
And then that here a couple of years ago, through their state audit program found that, you know, they cannot do that anymore was the current opinion. So that it was a great program, yes. And it not only benefited the fire department itself because we had some grant opportunities there, but if you recall going back a couple of years when we had to come to talk about funding for Grace Harbor EMS for service fees for their services, they were funded out of that. So it was kind of a double whammy.
Yeah. Is there any grant writer now for the fire department that could seek similar grants to that? Or should you be seeking, should you be seeking grants like that or opportunities to replace that?
No, we're always kind of on the lookout for grants. So it's just finding ones that fit for what our needs are.
And how much was that grant? Do you remember? Was it 300,000?
It depended on what you put in for. It ranged. It could be a couple thousand to, I remember we used to buy ambulances with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay.
Councilperson Morris.
I just kind of want to echo what Councilmember Cedar said as far as having a public hearing built into this. I think that's really important. I think we need to learn from our friends over in the city of Hoquiam. They kind of dropped the ball a little bit, if you will, as far as communicating with the public on the increases in their rates. And I think they're paying for it now. And I think we have a duty to our citizens who are already stretched really thin, to keep them in the loop and keep their input top of mind. I know that the situation that we have right now is not sustainable. I think we all recognize that. But I think we need to be mindful of the citizens, because they're stretched thin and it's not sustainable for them either. They have a heavy burden right now. So that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Chief.
Oh, okay, Martin, thank you. Appreciate your team's time and presentation, much appreciated. And we will be touching bases if there's any information needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, next is the mayor's report and
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, we have one more president.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Condemnation district.
it's okay.
Everyone hear me okay? All right, so. Yeah, that's a super necessary presentation, but that was tough sledding, so thanks for maybe you're bearing with me. I'll try to be quick as I can. So my name is David Marcel. I'm the executive director of the Grace Harbor Conservation District. And most people, when I say that, they say, what is a conservation district? There's 3,000 of them in the US. They've been here since the 40s. They're born out of the Dust Bowl era. It's all about keeping soil on the ground as a matter of national security type deal. But we've adapted and morphed over the last few decades. So we don't just use soil anymore. It's SWAPA HE. So soil, water, air, plants, animals, humans, a la education, and then energy. So those are our natural resources that we conserve, and we write grants to do that. I just want to point out that conservation is not preservation. It's been something that I've been educating folks on a lot lately. Preservation is simply protecting the environment, right, for the sake of doing that. I think that's necessary in some spots, but our office is all about conservation. So we want to use those natural resources in a mindful way so we can benefit from them long term. So we plant trees in essence a lot of times to maybe cut them down. You know, that's just a fact. We like that industry. We're really tied in to agricultural producers, landowners. And now that we're in the city, we work a lot more in the urban environment too. And that's kind of where I'm going to lead us down today and why we're here. So I guess I'll just also mention that we're 100% grant funded. So we operate over the last couple of years on average, it's been $3 to $4 million in grant revenue. 88% of those dollars went onto the lands of landowners in this county for projects, aka best management practices. That other 12% paid for 17 FTEs. They all live in Grays Harbor, so all their money stays here. And not to hire folks who don't work here. That's what we're all about. So anyway, I want to talk about the Sunday market. The district had a booth there every Sunday. We made a commitment last year, and that was great for us. We became known as the free tree guys. The DNR was going to throw away 5,000 seedlings, and so we just potted them up and started giving them away to folks here, and that was great. So basically, I'm on Facebook way too much for my job. So I'm scrolling through things and I noticed there was something about the market maybe in jeopardy or needed some funding like everything else does. And it clicked. And so there's a thing on the screen here. It's through the National Association of Conservation Districts. So they're this entity that oversees all 3,000 of us across the country. And we pay them dues and they turn it back to us in the form of grants that we can all apply for essentially. And so I'm here today really, to say that that market was great for the district. Me and my family went there, honestly, when we got our veggies there every Sunday as much as we could. Trying to put my money where my mouth is, working with the ag producers, right? Trying to actually support them. And so anyway, that being said, when I heard it might have some issues, I asked our outreach coordinator what's available to us, and we found this grant funding. So thank you all for getting us on the agenda so quickly. A lot of the hastiness of that was because this grant, like everything, hit my email just a couple of days ago, and it's due April 1st. So we don't really have much time. So I guess we'll just dive into it, right? There's this opportunity through a two-pronged grant. So you can see there's this map. It's been received from conservation districts all over. Mason City's received this grant, Ferguson and Clark down in Vancouver, and I think Grays Harbor slated to be the next one. But anyway, it's two pots of funding, a $10,000 planning grant that can go to the effort of creating a long-term sustainable plan to both maintain the market how it is, but then hopefully upgrade it and improve it too. And so that grant, I think the fire department talking there kind of shows you, if these volunteers don't write it, who's gonna, right? So that's what the district wants to do. We want to pursue that $10,000 planning grant and then sit and learn about how that market's run, maybe how we can keep it running no matter what. The best part is once we get that grant and we create that plan to this NACD standard, that makes us eligible for these implementation grants. Those are $60,000 a pop per year. Doing some research, I think, please back me up if I'm wrong, but the market runs on roughly $8,000 right now. 75% of that going to traffic control. So that market manager, it must be a labor of love or something because they're not getting paid, that's for sure. And, there's also tents being provided and chairs. So whatever you guys are doing, it's great. You're stretching a budget, but I think it deserves a bigger, better budget. So anyway, the plan is for them to apply for that grant. You need a letter of support for sure for all grants. This one caps you at 5. So the Grays Harbor Board of Supervisors just wrote one at our meeting. And so I'm here essentially just to ask the council to consider writing said letter of support before our deadline on the 1st. And what are we going to do? How's this going to shape up? I don't know. That's what the $10,000 will be there to pay us to figure out. But if they give us the money, we will deliver. That's what we have to do for that contract. So I'm pretty confident that we'll get it. It's just a matter of saying go. That's how we survive, and we're pretty darn good at writing these grants. So I think I'll just truncate most of my presentation from there and ask for questions. But my vision really is just, again, a bigger, better market. Resources, you know, more tents, more chairs, maybe someone to lock those up. We'll have to transport them. Some kind of semi-permanent signage. I don't know. We can talk about all those details a year from now if we get the planning grant, but the deadline is April 1, and to wrap up that plan, it gives you till October 2025, but obviously that would be, you know, going into the market season. So our goal would be to get this planning grant and have it completed with that NACD plan well before the market starts next year. So if there's any questions, let me know, but
I just found out there's some money available in LTAC. Maybe you could ask finance.
Right. And money, speaking of that, I forgot to say, like all grants, these have match. Right? They ask for a 25% non-federal match. The district at this point, we'll just go to our other quiver of grants to match it. I don't expect the city to scrounge that up. It'd be great if y'all could, it shows some buy-in, but nonetheless, we're not here trying to get matched or any of that stuff either. And if this grant doesn't go here, it will go to some other district in the country. So I'm gonna bring that here.
David, I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you for picking this up and running with it on such short notice to save the Sunday market. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's stressful, but it's what we do. Kind of the nature of what we do.
Councilman Seal.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So you want to apply for a grant, you need to apply before April or by April 1st. And you need a letter of support from the city to apply for this grant. You're asking us to approve, directing the city manager, I guess, to maybe, or the mayor, to write a letter of support for your grant.
Yeah, so we've been coordinating, and I'll draft that. I'll get it here before the 27th.
What would the grant be used for? What's it for?
It'd be a $10,000 request for planning. It's chalked up as what they call technical assistance that will allow district staff to come here and research. How's this market work? You know, just all that. And essentially create the next grant application for $60,000, right? We'll use that money as well to do that work. So, yeah.
The Sunday market.
Is it appropriate then to move that we council request the mayor and the city administrator and or to draft a letter of support for their grant?
On behalf of the council?
On behalf of the council, the city?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Cool. Be happy to write the letter. Yeah.
You can call me out if you don't get it, I guess. We're going, so thank you all.
Good luck.
We can give away support in any way we want.
All right, so on the mayor's report here, I just in the and keep the meeting a little bit shorter. I have a letter from Becky Durr, and she'd like to be put on the library advisory board. And so she's a wonderful volunteer in our community. She's been really active. She's retired right now, mostly teaching experience, but I recommend if somebody would like to make a motion that we appoint Becky to the library council board for advisory board. Sorry, go ahead.
So moved.
Second. First and second, is there any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I just, this, two things. Also, I just came back from Bremerton. I spent the whole day there today, looking at their infrastructure projects, their waterfront, and trying to see if there are things that we could take from their community and their wonderful experience in creating a wonderful, vibrant downtown. And I just, I was really excited to see a lot of things, and so I'll be working on that. I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about trying to help our downtown. And then secondly, I just want to clear up one point about the Rain Glow Festival. It's it is well, first we won't be having the art walk this year. I'm sorry to say there's no funding for that, but we will try, we have some money in our savings and we'll try to have the Rainbow Festival. We have some fundraising. It's not a rainbow festival. So the thing I wanted to clear up is that it's not a gay event. I'm gay, and so I put it on. That doesn't make it a gay event. Aberdeen is a city ran by a gay mayor. It doesn't make it a gay city. So maybe a couple people go there that are gay, but any straight people that go there, you know, I'll protect your rights and let you in. So I just wanted to, I mean, a couple of gay people might go there, but you know, if anybody in this community wants to put on events, always try to support the event that's being put on, and don't say, you know, we want this instead of that. We can help the homeless, and we can have events downtown to help our community. So, and just that, you're welcome. If you want help coming up with an event or putting on an event, you know, I'd be willing to help you with that. I have a lot of experience. So, thank you. All right, so now let's go to council reports.
Committee report. At the last meeting, the HRC discussed the RFP for our homeless shelter, the growing issue of vehicle camping, and we reviewed the vision, mission, and goals of the Homeless Response Committee. The committee will review the vision and the goals of the HRC at the next meeting to review what goals have been met already and if there are new goals that we can set. We've also revisited and reviewed a community survey that went out last year that received 940 responses from people who live, own businesses, work, and shop and visit in Aberdeen. And some of them are from out of town, but we want to do another survey to see what the public thinks we've done and what they think we haven't done and what they'd like to have done. We want the whole community involved in this. It's not just the city council. It's going to take a whole community. Grays Harbor County has announced a request for proposals for $500,000 to go towards a homeless shelter. The HRC has weighed the pros and cons of applying for the funds. There's a report on tonight's agenda that is requesting that the council approve the date for a workshop so that we can talk about homelessness, and it won't just be with the committee, but it'll be with the whole council. We'd like to host a homeless response workshop with the rest of the council on Wednesday, March 20th at 6 p.m. It's a special agenda item that will be read later in this council meeting. The state legislature has approved $20 million in the governor's supplemental budget to go towards homelessness, with 30% of those funds committed to rural communities like ours. Mayor Orr and I sent a letter to the budget writers asking for this very increase and to ensure that a portion of the funding was set aside for rural communities, because we are ignored. Our legislatures are hearing us, and they're backing us up with their support with funding. The HRC has requested to have back-to-back sanitation cleanups at the encampments on State Street and River Street for the months of April, May, and June. Our staff have been preparing for the cleanup and have began reaching out to community resource groups to prepare as well, because it's very emotional. It's emotional for the staff. It's emotional for the people at the camp. And they have to prepare. It's a big project, and it's very expensive and time consuming, and it's hard. The February homeless related monthly costs are included in the agenda packet. Fire, police, and public works expense, they've been included in this report. In February, the city spent $26,598 in services related to the homeless population. Next month's health and sanitation cleanups will cost the city more initially, but ideally it will result in costing the city less money because the frequent cleanups should result in less trash to haul away. The HRC is currently looking for a new committee member to represent the business community, as well as a new member to represent the community resource groups. If you know anyone from the business community or anyone from a community resource group that would like to join the committee, please ask them to send a letter of interest to Mayor or City Administrator Clemens. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others? Being none, okay, we move on to the city administrator report.
I've provided a report on your desk just for the sake of time. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Okay, any directors reports?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I do have one.
Yes, go ahead, Chief Green.
All right, council members, in your packet, you should have received a memorandum that I had sent to our city administrator, Ruth Clemens, about potentially providing emergency police services for the city of Cosmopolis. So to give you just a little bit of background and timeline, the city of Cosmopolis is having some financial difficulty at this point, and they've laid off, or 4 of their officers have left in the last month. They're down to 2 police officers right now. Their chief, Keith Lehman, reached out to Deputy Chief Andy Snodgrass and myself at the end of February and asked to meet and see what options they might be able to provide. So he is going to stay on board 90 hours, and then they're going to continue to have 1 full-time police officer. So that leaves basically after hours, evening from like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then on weekends that they still need some sort of police coverage. So we took that information and got an official request from Mr. Darren Rains, the city administrator for the city of Cosmopolis, with those proposal details. And then he asked for us to put together some sort of proposal. So tonight I'm coming to you to give you an idea what this proposal looks like for us. And then if you're interested, we can go forward with this and meet with the Cosmopolis City Council to let them know the details. And then eventually, if it gets to the point where they accept us, we want a contract, then we come back to you all for a contract to approve. So how this looks for us, for the city of Aberdeen, is we still have the staffing to handle Cosmopolis's call load right now. I want to first off state that our number 1 priority is the city of Aberdeen. So we're not going to do anything that would cause any kind of detrimental service that we would provide. And also, you know, we have no desire to take over the Cosmopolis Police Department. I've had several people ask me about that, and that's absolutely not our intention. This was not anything that we started these conversations. They came to us and asked us for some assistance. So that's where we kind of are coming from. And realistically, we are Cosmopolis's backup police department as it stands now. In the last year, we've responded to just under 70 calls for the city of Cosmopolis. There are times at night when they don't have an officer on duty. So they'll call and ask for mutual aid. So we'll respond and assist and stay on scene while the situation calms until they can respond. So that's kind of what we're looking to still continue to do. So numbers wise, how we came up with our numbers is basically they're agreeing to cover those 12 hours a day during the week. So about 60 hours a week times 4 weeks. And that leaves about 63% of the time that we need to be covered by the Aberdeen Police Department. So Tara Dunford, our financial consultant, came up with some numbers, and our police force budget is 7.8 million right now. So when you divide our 27,700 calls for service, that works out to about $283 per call is approximately what we spend. And that's our total operational cost. That considers wear and tear on patrol vehicles, gasoline, wages, and benefits. So that kind of gives us an understanding of how much a call is worth to us and how much it would cost for us to respond to Cosmopolis. So the city of Cosmopolis last year had 689 calls. So their call load is, as I said, it's quite small. So we estimate that would be about 434 calls for us to respond to. So when we talk about what calls that we would be willing to respond to the city of Cosmopolis, is emergency calls for people that are in danger, crimes against persons, or major crimes that are in progress. So those are the calls we'd respond to and take reports and take enforcement action or use our discretion. What we're saying is that our officer is going to say, if we have a call, like suppose somebody's reporting mail theft or something that's not a crime in progress, or it's not a crime against a person, that's something we would turn over to the Cosmopolis Police Department the following morning or the next time they have business hours so they can do the appropriate investigation, because that's really not an emergent necessity. So when we did the math of 434 estimated calls a year, that works out about $10,300 a month. So that's my proposal for you all to think about tonight. And, we don't have a contract yet, so we're talking about the terms. Probably like we would review this on a month-by-month basis and see if it's beneficial to both sides. And then until they come out of some sort of, whatever hole they're in right now, because we just don't know where they're at.
Yeah, in many cases, already the Aberdeen Police Department's already going to Cosmopolis for these calls anyway, so really we're kind of now just gonna be getting paid for those calls that we already were going to.
Yeah, and we're still gonna go anyway, regardless if there was a contract or not. That's the right thing to do. Just, it kind of depends on how it works out if we're gonna continue to provide services. We also have an opportunity to let them know, like if they have some sort of a major felony or something, and we were able to have to call out like our detectives to investigate. Like somebody passing away or something like that, then they'd bill us by hour. Yes, sir.
So, excuse me, if you weren't finished.
No, go ahead.
I didn't know if this is an appropriate time to ask any questions or if we
Sure
want to
thing.
wait till an actual contract is brought forward.
Yep.
So with the financial difficulties the city of Cosmopolis is experiencing right now, say we enter into a contract with them, they agree to pay a certain amount, whether it's 10,000 a month or something more or less. What kind of surety do we have? Do we know that they're gonna actually be able to pay the bill? And what happens if they can't pay the bill?
Sure. None right now. Yeah, to be totally honest with you. Yeah.
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 Right now, the other, I think the other group that's proposed the bid is the county. And even if the county were to, take on the contract, we would still be responding to it to cover for the county until they could arrive. So, I mean, that's why we just decided we probably should do this. We're gonna be responding no matter what.
But does the city of Cosmopolis have any kind of a surety or a bond or insurance policy or something for things like this?
Not that I don't know. If I don't know their finances, I don't know what their budget is. We could just charge them on a monthly basis and make sure that they pay on a monthly basis.
And the expense, if it's can't be paid during a particular time or in a full amount, it would just accrue a balance. And then at some point, if the city declares bankruptcy or something, we're a debtor and that's it.
I suspect that because they have no police officers, I believe they have one. I suspect that they have the funds to do that this is cheaper than the 4 officers that they've laid off. So my assumption is that they have the funds available.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Looking it up.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or concerns? And most of the details will flesh out in the contract, if you all approve it, and then the Cosmic Council's interest in pursuing this as well. As the city administrator mentioned, they initially approached the Grace Harbor County Sheriff's Office. So we worked with the sheriff. This isn't like a competing bid with anything they're looking to offer as well. They offered full-time employees, 1 or 2, and we simply aren't able to do that. And with their call load and us being so close, I don't think that's something that we actually need to do either.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, that's it.
So we will submit the proposal to the city of Cosmopolis, and then if they accept it, we will bring it to all of you to review and to approve the enter into contract.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. So now we have, let's see, finance.
Mr. Mayor and Council, we have a resolution replacing resolution 2018-18, amending the Aberdeen Museum of History Collections Management Policy. I move that we adopt this resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Overall, there are fairly minor edits to the policy.
Okay. Is that it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? If not, the motion passes.
This will be resolution 2024-06.
Okay, is somebody gonna speak for? Let's see.
Mr. Mayor, I'm
public
going to
safety.
deliver the public safety report for Councilmember Hodgkin tonight. We don't have any items on the agenda to discuss, but I'll go over real briefly. Some of the notes I have here from the police and fire. So we'll start with the police department. Their activity report, 7,201 calls so far this year, up from last year's 5,933. So 23.3%, a total of 1,681 were proactive traffic stops. So that's about 23%. Aberdeen police officers responded to 110 calls for services around River Street, State Street, and F Street in the month of February. Volunteers in police service, The Aberdeen Volunteers and Police Services contributed 191 hours during the month of February. Valued at $16.28 an hour, this is a contribution of $3,109.48 of service to the city of Aberdeen. The Grace Harbor Community Foundation has funded a $15,000 grant to help expand the APD lockbox program countywide in 2024. APD and AFD personnel and the VIPS volunteers will be working with other jurisdictions in Grace Harbor County to determine the most expeditious way to move the program forward. From the fire department, health statistics for the month of February, they responded to 492 incidents. This is up 3.8% year to date. Homeless response data, between EMS and fire, there was 55 total responses. Overdose response data, they responded to 23 incidents in the month of February. Our fire service specialist report, Mr. Mitch Housden, he's very busy. 47 public contacts made, 10 home visits, 5 patient referrals for proper care, and 6 business inspections. And lastly, public outreach. The Aberdeen Fire Department provided CPR training to 20 students at Harbor High School. The department partnered with local group Friends for Life to provide an overdose awareness class. This class was delivered to 30 community members and covered the dangers of fentanyl and how to reverse the effects of an overdose using Narcan. That's it for public safety. Thank
Well, thank you very much. Now, Council Member Lawrence.
Public Works has nothing to offer this evening.
Right, thank you. And special agenda items, back to Council Member Morris.
Good. I have a request from the city administrator to approve the proposed dates for a homeless shelter workshop and numerous budget workshops throughout the year. These should all be in your agenda packet, and I'm sure will be properly noticed when they're coming up. So I would move that we accept this report.
Second. And moved in second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, on the request for council action, I accidentally I had the homeless cleanup on my mind when I wrote it. So it should actually be March 20th. So that's next week is the proposed time for the workshop for next week at 6 o'clock. So yeah, so that's the only change I would make on that. Here at City Council.
6.
Or
Not 6:30.
6 o'clock.
Right.
Would it be possible for us to keep the April 3rd date instead? Is this an appropriate time to bring that up?
Yep, that's totally up. This is up to you guys, when you guys want to have the workshops. The reason for the workshop on the 20th is because we want to discuss the funding from the county and we want to meet that deadline to submit it.
Okay. All right. Now we're back to public comments again, please. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks. Okay, now we're gonna go to back to public comments. So please limit it to 3 minutes. Thanks.
In your envelopes are photos of my son and the family that misses him every single day. I needed to make sure that you guys were able to see what real life consequences have from your actions or lack of actions when it comes to what the city needs. I lost my son an ability to have our children. My husband lost his son and a chance to have another. My other children lost their baby brother and that they helped prepare for 9 months. There is a direct link of the lack of action against the homeless and drug addicts and the fact that my son is dead. It is obvious that no one knows what accountability is around here until you can profit off of it from other people. Your lifestyle has become more important than the actual human lives you guys are making decisions for. I will not stop bringing up all of this until action starts happening, progress, not promises. If anyone is actually interested in hearing the whole story and moving forward on solutions, I am ready to talk about it. Thank you.
Silver Sidell, Ward 2. This is probably a question in the comment. There's been a lot of the old RVs that live or parking on the street that you guys have addressed here today as well. Every time I talk to an officer about trying to get someone that's living in their vehicles on the street or partially on the street and partially on private property, sometimes they say that there's nothing they can do because of the laws that are in the city. So, you know, I have to pay taxes. Everyone that owns a house in Aberdeen has to pay taxes to live in the city. You know, you can come and live in your vehicle on the street, move it, you know, possibly 3 feet each, you know, every other day or what, 72 hours, I think what is the possibility of getting this law changed to where, you know, this is not a thing that's going on in the city, you know, I mean, Olympia was able to move them along. You know, they were up by the hospital in Dreesen there. It was loaded up at the city park. They got that whole community to move along somehow. What is our right and what are our options to have that done here? Because, like I said, we all pay taxes here, and you know they're not. And the homeless people downtown are burning up a lot of, you know, homeless drug addicts are burning up a lot of our taxes, and with the paramedics and police department, you know, response calls. I mean, there's got to be something that can be done to be pushed back. I know there was the lawsuit in Boise that, you know, limited where they need to go, but there's got to be something that we can do. Can any of you guys answer a question? Is there a way that we can change this law?
And so it's we're not supposed to back and forth at these 3-minute conversations, but we can have somebody talk with you afterwards if you'd like.
Yeah, it just was for the public would be nice to know as well. Maybe some kind of comment on the next meeting, you know, what we can do to change these laws would be nice. Because it's definitely a burden to the taxpayers, you know, when we realize that, you know, the code enforcement, Bill Cedar won't do his job to clean up our neighborhood. He just won't even come and take my comment or my complaint. You know, I finally got a complaint done online, you know, and we'll see if there's any action from that. I'll probably be addressing that at the next council meeting. I mean, it's really tough for me and, you know, other people to get up there and talk about these things. I mean, public speaking has never been my forte, you know, but when you push into a corner and you're asked to pay for all these, you know, incidences with our taxpayer dollars, it becomes a burden to us. So, thank you.
Thanks. Is there, oh, okay.
Les Bolden, Ward 4. You think you'd recognize you. Sad to hear that we're not going to have the Aberdeen Art Walk this year. And I'm sure there's businesses downtown that feel that way too. Hotel motel tax money. It's not your money. It's money from people who come and stay in hotels and they pay a bed tax. And that money goes into an account called LTAC, lodging tax account. And it's to promote activities that bring people into town so that they'll spend money. They can't spend it to fix the sidewalks or to help you out, or unless you own a business, or you just like going downtown and having something fun to do. But we've got an issue that's been brought up, this issue of interest. What does that really mean? Do any of you have family members who are involved in Little League? You guys have an interest in Little League and you're going to give them money. Are you involved with any nonprofits? You know, at what level do we define this interest? Are you going to be cutting yourself out of being able to be involved and support things that you really care about in this community? I think that's a really important question. And you guys need to think about the answer. The state auditor says there's a way around this. And you've decided that there's not a way around this. So you need to ask every time you guys give out money, wait a second, is there anybody, any officer of the city have an interest in this? But, you know, it's a mess. And I think it's something that you need to think about resolving. So I hope that you will do that. And I won't be seeing you at the Aberdeen Art Walk. So there's a weekend that we won't be doing something downtown. But hopefully I'll see you at Rainbow, which I've never been to Rainbow before, but I'm looking forward to it. And it probably won't be as big as it would be if you guys would figure out a way to make this work. But I guess we'll struggle along rather than making big strides.
All right. Anything for the good of the order? Yes, Councilman Nels.
Yes, coming up next week on the 19th, that's Tuesday from 5 to 8 at the Rotary Log Pavilion, is a open house for the North Aberdeen Bridge Project. This is an important time for people to weigh in on what their preferred options would be for the for what the consultants have come back with, and chance to look at pictures, to make comments, to make suggestions, to talk to city council members who are there representing especially wards 3 and 2. So hopefully we'll get some good attendance at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
It should, thank you, Councilmember Ellis, for mentioning that. It should be noted that this is a public open house. It's not like a public forum, like where we have public comment or a podium for people to kind of talk. This is, you could leave public comment with the consultants that are there. You can leave written comment. We will have someone there to transcribe your comments, or, you know, so, but it's an open setting where you can walk around and look at the concepts around you.
This sounds similar to what happened last year. And the feedback from that was extraordinarily negative from the citizens because they had no idea what to do, who to ask. People there didn't have any answers to any of their questions. When are we actually going to have an open house that citizens can attend and come and ask questions, especially those who are going to be impacted by this?
Right. You could definitely, if the council would like to have a workshop or something where they would like to invite the public to talk in that fashion, but we have to meet certain like federal requirements. So these are hosted by the engineering firm and what they're federally required to do. So, but yes, if I'm hearing that.
Yeah, I think this has been mentioned before, that it's been suggested, and I'd like to reiterate it, that I think we need to have a public open house where residents, especially those who are going to be affected directly by this, can actually come, attend, get information, get questions answered, and give some input. And I'd like to see it happen.
I want to check with Director Sanger to see, I think there may be an opportunity, there might be a public hearing, but I'm not totally sure. I just want to check in with him, and we'll look at the timelines and see if there was something built into the public engagement portion, because I know that that was very important.
Please, thank you.
And Councilmember Cedar, I was at the last committee meeting where we went through the same process that the public is now going to be invited to go through. And there should be opportunities to get answers and express concerns, but also at this point, we're trying to narrow down from a menu of options which ones to have the consultants focus on to come back then with more specific details.
Yeah, but don't you think the citizens who are going to be affected in particular need to weigh in on those options?
That's why the workshop's
The
being.
last time we did a workshop that's been described similar to what's going to be planned coming up next week, I had numerous citizens come up to me at that workshop, and I myself attended. And no, there was no direction. There was no consultation. People were unable. I'd ask a question of a consultant. Oh, I don't know. You'd have to go talk to so-and-so. Talk to so-and-so. They said, well, I don't know. You'd have to talk to so-and-so. Talk to them. I don't know. So it wasn't very productive.
I think you'll find this is going to be, different.
Thank you. I hope so.
I absolutely concur with Councilmember Sedor, because that's the exact same feedback that I got.
Yeah.
So if we can talk to the director Sanger and find out if there was something more engaging with the public built in, that would be fantastic.
Please, thank you.
Okay, anything else? So I guess it's on you to make the motion.
I'm not going to adjourn.
All right. Good night, everybody.
I told it, I said, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I told her, again, I don't.